CAM and all of our attendees today. I want to thank Amy Roust and Matt Hone for making this webinar possible. They were the brains and the brawn of getting it all going. This type of education is pretty invaluable in providing us the opportunity for growth, new ideas in a short and free format, and we really appreciate it. I do want to remind everybody that today is the last day of the early bird registration for CAM conference. That's coming up at the end of October, October 26th through the 29th. We have a large number of classes and sessions lined up for that week, and they will not be disappointing. So I urge you to go ahead and get signed up. Early bird registration means that as of tomorrow, it does go up $25. So take a look, and I want to thank Klara and Nicole from Esri for putting this on today and sharing, taking their time and sharing their presentation, and I will turn it over to them to talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me do a quick check here that when I advance my slide, you can see our beautiful mugshots.
Sure do.
Okay, awesome. So hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Grams. I am a solution engineer over in your neighboring Missouri out of St. Louis. I was saying before the call started that this is my first time joining a CAM Lunch and Learn, and then Amy mentioned there's only been 2. So we are very honored to be part of a early iteration of the Lunch and Learns. It's really exciting. So I normally work with state governments, and Kansas is one of them. So great to see so many familiar names. And with me today is my colleague, Klara. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Klara Schmitt. I'm a UX UI design lead on ArcGIS Hub and enterprise sites, and I specialize in web accessibility.
So I'm going to start the presentation today with a little background on web accessibility, disability, and why these things matter to us as mostly GIS practitioners. I'll attempt to frame the rest of Klara's presentation, which is really going to be the meat here. And so she's going to be focusing on accessible content in ArcGIS Hub, apps, and really any web presence or web page. And that will be in terms of all the guidelines and laws that Esri and all organizations are either striving to follow or are required to follow. So when speaking about web accessibility, a term that is often used is inclusive design. So that means design to be used by as many people as possible without any special adaptation. So an example of inclusive design in cartography might be choosing a color ramp that people with color blindness can see enough range in. Just thinking of my background in meteorology, when you turn on the velocity scan of a radar, it's in red and green. That's actually a really hard color ramp for some people with color blindness to interpret. But Klara today is going to focus more on all of the ways in which our web design in particular affects those with not only visual but auditory, physical, and other types of permanent disabilities. So creating solutions that remove barriers to access for folks without permanent disabilities actually benefits everyone. Maybe let me rephrase that. When we think about web accessibility, we benefit everyone, not just those who have permanent disabilities, because actually some folks on the call from the Kansas Water Office and I were just recently discussing how to optimize a hub site for more rural folks or folks across the state that might have lower bandwidth. So in this presentation, we will all learn some techniques that give all people an opportunity to take in our information and our maps and our apps. So in fact, some level of disability impacts most people throughout their lifetime. Sometimes it's permanently and sometimes it's in temporary situations. So you might not think of having a broken arm or being a sleep deprived new parent as a disability, but changes in our mental and physical capacity as a result of aging, of injury, of sickness, of stress, like the little permanent eye twitch I've had going on for 2 weeks. These all occur naturally throughout the course of life. So this slide's just showing an example of permanent, temporary, and situational conditions. And did I hear someone asking a question? Okay, sorry about that. So knowing now that disabilities are way more pervasive than we may think, and in fact, 1 in 4 adults have one, you may be starting to understand why we're here today talking to you about accessibility and maps and apps. So a really relevant example are COVID dashboards and how our most forward-thinking customers were really quick to create simplified tabular versions of those dashboards for people that use screen readers. It's estimated that 2 billion people will need some type of assistive product in the next 9 years, and that's going to increase the amount of web traffic that will come from a person with a disability. And what's really important to know, especially for those of us working in state and local and federal government, is that the US is one of 25 or so countries that have pretty stringent accessibility laws and guidelines. So anyone new to the field or getting acquainted with this topic of accessibility, like I am, may be overwhelmed by the number of acronyms and laws that pertain to accessibility topics. There are both international and country-specific standards, and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, WCAG, I'm still trying to say it right, is the current US and international benchmark. And this accessibility standard is intended for web developers and digital tools that wind up on the web. So if we're all following modern GIS best practices, that really includes most of us. Esri's current goal is to be in compliance with the WCAG 2.1 AA standard. I'll get into that in a moment. Section 508 are the official accessibility guidelines within the US, and in 2018, the US Department of Justice upheld that the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, does apply to websites. So again, that's just so relevant for our state and local government listeners. And finally, as mentioned on the previous slide, the WCAG criteria are the US and international kind of shared accessibility guidelines. They're organized into 3 levels of conformance, and Esri seeks to meet level AA. So this addresses the most common barriers to disabled users, and level AAA is the most stringent, so it's a goal that organizations can strive for. In 2021, Esri's accessibility team worked super extensively to update all of our accessibility documentation for our most core products, so ArcGIS Pro, Online, and Enterprise. And then they are also prioritizing products that are in high demand or critical to government customers, for example, field maps or experience builder, especially for those customers for whom having that type of documentation is really critical to your procurement processes. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our real accessibility expert on the line, and that's Klara.
Cool. Let me see if I can just get PowerPoint open. All right.
There's my eye twitch. It's nonstop.
I also have an eye twitch, so no judgment. All right. Just double checking that we can see it. Cool.
All good.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the techniques that you all can use to improve the accessibility of your content published through Esri applications. As your software provider, it is our job to handle most keyboard interactions, status messages, error handling, state changes, and overall navigation for keyboard and assistive technologies. While I might be talking a lot today about supporting those who use screen readers, it's because we've found while working on Hub that if you really nail keyboard and screen reader interactions, that other technologies like voice recognition software or using switch devices will work much better too. But as with many of our tools, you are often able to customize the output information product. So designing an accessible experience is really a partnership between us. While Esri is working with an accessibility vendor on the best path forward to making highly visual content like web maps accessible to a non-sighted audience, we won't be covering that in today's presentation simply because we don't have all the answers yet. For today's presentation, I have a Hub initiative that we've mocked up around the topic of municipal drought conservation. Within the site, I have text content, image content, an embedded instant app, an accessible base map, and an accessible theme. I also have global nav enabled to provide a persistent search, a search catalog featuring Kansas water data, and at the end of this presentation, I will show you what it's like to navigate by screen reader to a dataset. Whether you are authoring content or customizing an Esri app, the key elements you will often control in our accessibility partnership are content and multimedia, images, color, and simple do-it-yourself testing. First, we'll start with content best practices. When writing link text, the more context you can provide in the link itself, the better. Why? Well, assistive technologies such as screen readers often have built-in keyboard shortcuts that allow the individual using that technology to navigate in special ways. One of those ways is they can choose to browse your page solely by links. If you, say, have a set of 4 cards that all have an Explore button, as Hub's gallery cards do, unfortunately, this will often result in the individual hearing 4 times Explore in a row, and in the link shortcut menu with no context on what they would actually be exploring. This is why it's best to write link text that educates the individual on where the link might take them. Now with Hub's gallery card, you do not have that option because the cards are dynamically populated and you cannot edit the individual cards. However, you have the choice to use the cards without the button, which you can set under the appearance settings panel, and thereby turns the card heading into a link. Or if you do use the button, we programmatically associate it with the heading for a little bit more context. So for instance, in this screenshot of 4 cards from FEMA, the first card in the screenshot, if you landed on the button, you'd hear Tornado Incident Journal Explore. When creating links, you also want to avoid opening links in new tabs or windows unless you've provided some awareness that action will occur. If you are navigating with assistive technologies, it can be a bit disorienting to have a link open in a new tab. This is why WCAG technique G200 recommends not opening in a new tab at all. However, if you are going to open or have a link open in a new tab, because sometimes we want to, all you need to do is warn the individual. You can do this by including a warning link in the text itself, or many sites simply include an icon that gives the warning in its text alternative. Now on to headings. Each page you publish should have at least one H1 structured heading to give visitors context. And again, screen readers have a shortcut that allows the individual to navigate by headings in order to move around your page content more quickly. You can see this in the screenshot I've shared of the VoiceOver headings menu on our Hub site. This is also why you do not want to use semantic headings to increase font size. It can sometimes be tempting, especially if there isn't an easy way to set font size, but it will muddy up the heading shortcut menu to those who rely on it. It is considered a best practice by WCAG to correctly nest headings. Essentially, you start with an H1, then an H2, H3, etc. However, this is not always going to be possible within Esri's builders. We have talked to our accessibility vendor, and they said it was preferable that as an authoring tool, we present out of order headings rather than us not using headings at all in our cards and widgets. So for instance, on my demo site, the embedded instant app has H1 because as a standalone app, that would be the app title. But within the Hub site, from a content reading order perspective, it would probably make more sense as an H2. Unfortunately, we can't change that because the instant app is not going to know whether it's embedded in an iframe or not, and the surrounding context isn't always going to be the same content structure everywhere. So we're just going to have to live with it on this site. We did recently add a feature to the Hub gallery cards where you can set what heading level you want used on the gallery card titles. It does not change the font size, but it does help you correctly order headings on a Hub site or page. Now with labels, the vast majority of labeling will be covered behind the scenes by our apps, and it will include form labels, widget expand and collapse states, form validation, error handling, etc., which all make the app's keyboard navigable. However, there are a few cases that you need to be on the lookout for yourself. If you embed content by iframe, as we did with the Instant app, then you will need to write an iframe title that describes what content can be found within the iframe. When using a screen reader, iframe content isn't read as part of the natural page flow, the same way it presents visually to those of us with sight. With a screen reader, the individual using that technology has to enter into the iframe. So much like with linked text, you want to explain why the content within the iframe matters and why they might want to enter into it to explore. Also, related to labeling, if you are including a static table on your page, which you can do from the Hub text card, you want to make sure it includes a table header row, as this provides context for those using screen readers as they navigate through the table data cells. Good content structure also includes good navigation. Web pages should have a metadata title that shows in the browser tab. They should have consistently placed navigation if present, and there should be multiple methods to find content associated with a site. This is why if you are using Hub, I strongly encourage you to keep global navigation enabled, as it will offer a persistent search on all pages. Now let's talk a little bit about who uses keyboard navigation, as maybe it'll be something you find yourself doing some manual testing in the future on. On screen, I have an image of the interactive legend in our ArcGIS Instant app. And you can see keyboard focus is on the first button, forms a blue border around the legend button, which expands and collapses the pane that contains the legend. Visible keyboard focus is essential to sighted individuals who navigate by keyboard, typically using keystrokes such as Tab and Shift-Tab to move forward and backward, Enter to open links, and Spacebar to select form elements. But you should only expect to see that focus state on links, form elements, and interactive widgets. Now, if you've ever tested with a screen reader, you will notice the screen reader moves through all the content, including non-text or non-linked text and images. It's not the same keyboard experience for both audiences. Unless the screen reader itself comes with a built-in focus state, you should not expect to see this type of focus state with the border or whatever type of focus state is being used on every single element read by a screen reader. Both would have it on the buttons, but plain text is only focusable by screen reader. I'm only going to touch on multimedia briefly. A lot of it, like captioning video, has to be done on other platforms, but there is a feature request that comes up frequently, and I want to explain why it does not presently exist on Hub. Carousels are a very popular feature request, but they are very difficult to make accessible for those using assistive technologies because the content moves, it's hard to maintain active focus, and you might have to navigate through all the slides just to get to the controls that turn it off. For these reasons, the accessibility community actively discourages using carousels, and this is also why there is no auto-rotating or auto-playing content widgets within Hub. Moving on to images. This is probably the guideline that most of us have encountered at least once. Images fall into the category of non-text content, and as such require a text equivalent. For images using an HTML image tag, this is rendered as the alt attribute and describes the image to screen readers. If you have an image tag, you always want an alt attribute that either describes the image or marks it as decorative. Because if the alt attribute isn't included, the screen reader will read the file name instead. And in practicality, most of us are not that great at writing well thought out file names. One thing I want to note, because I've been asked about it before, is that not all images that look like images will be communicated as images to assistive technologies. I know that's a little vague, and I'll get into it in a couple more slides. This just to say, alternative text, or alt text, can be added to any visual content, but it's a concept. It's not an actual method of appending a description, whereas the alt attribute that I mentioned is an actual method that can be used on image tags. Before we get into the different flavors of images, let's talk briefly about what makes good alternative text. You should describe the image succinctly, use details relevant to the context, avoid unnecessary words like image of or picture of, as assistive technologies will handle that automatically. And if you're using an image as a link, you should describe the link destination, not the content of the image. On this slide, I have a radar model that I pulled from Twitter. In the code example, I've applied alt text via the alt attribute that says 10-day precipitation model with 2.3-inch average accumulation for mid-state Kansas. Now, as far as relevant details go, the alternative text for this image may vary on context. Given I pulled this image for this presentation, I'm not including all the details that might otherwise be pertinent if my target audience were greater than the state of Kansas. If I needed to describe the image as a whole, I might instead write 10-day precipitation model shows heavy rain for central and southern states. So now let's come back to talking about the images that look like images but aren't actually images. Background images. Background images are often found below content, so you'll have something like text sitting on top. And background images are rendered with CSS. If an individual has CSS disabled to avoid overly distracting visuals, then the image is not going to show at all. Plus, screen readers don't communicate anything about CSS rendered images. This is why background images are typically considered decorative and not the best means to share critical information. Side note about decorative images. They aren't exclusively reserved for background images. If an image is only present for visual interest, or writing alt text for it provides no real additional value to the surrounding text, then you should leave the alt attribute empty to mark it as decorative. On screen, I have a fancy little swirl. This is 100% a decorative image. Now, because I'm using it as a concrete example of a useless decorative image in the slide deck, I do actually have alt text on it in PowerPoint. But if I were including in my hub site for added flair, I would leave the alt text field empty to mark it as decorative. I'm going to get a little bit more technical about background images. You don't necessarily need to know this unless you're doing coding or doing manual testing with assistive technologies. CSS background images are nice because they are a breeze to resize when it comes to differently sized devices. They can be made to communicate themselves as images. If you are going to do this, though, you need to add an extra ARIA role of role equals img to the container with the background image to let assistive technologies know it's masquerading as an image. And you need to add an ARIA-label that will act as your alt text format. If you were to inspect the code of Story Maps Cascade, you can see they do this. By default, they have section background images marked as decorative. But if you add alt text through their builder, then they add the code necessary to make it read as an actual image. Now for vector images, these usually fall into two categories on the modern web: SVGs or CSS icon fonts. Vector images are popular because they resize well without getting blurry. When adding alt text to icons or SVGs, using ARIA label is a pretty effective method of attaching a text alternative. But again, if your icon offers no additional value were you to label it, consider marking it decorative or not labeling it. On screen, I'm showing an image of 3 cards in Hub's I Want to Use section. Each card contains an icon, a label, and helper text. And the first card also has a down chevron. The icons on the left are hidden from screen readers because the card tells you all you really need to know. Create a map, create a story, open an ArcGIS Online. Knowing that there is a map icon, a browser icon, and a cloud icon offers no additional value, so we hide them. But the down-facing chevron is not hidden because it is a functional icon, and it has an ARIA label indicating that the menu expands. Now, how do you apply an ARIA label? I'm going to get a little technical again because Hub does support adding SVG objects via HTML in our text card, and I want you to know the best practices if you add them yourself. SVG objects do not support the image alt attribute. The W3C specification says to use title tags. In our experience working on Hub, not all screen readers work great with title tags. We have found the ARIA label to be much more effective. So in this code example I have on screen for the Activity Pulse SVG icon, I am highlighting where to place an ARIA label or title tags in the code. I don't recommend using both because some screen readers will read both, and that's kind of an annoying experience. You essentially hear the same thing twice. Unfortunately, screen readers are a bit like browsers. They don't all operate exactly the same. In fact, they even fluctuate based on what browser you are using. And to that point, I've discovered screen readers are more consistent in recognizing SVGs if you add role equals image to the SVG object. Coming back to how you mark SVG objects as decorative. You want to append ARIA hidden equals true to hide them from screen readers. If you are a developer, do not use ARIA hidden equals false as the opposite setting. I know, it feels super counterintuitive, but it has unstable screen reader support and you're better just yanking off the whole attribute instead. Leaving the world of images, let's take a look at color. The basic gist of the contrast guideline is that there's a luminance contrast ratio that your regular text, large size text, and non-text graphics should pass. This isn't something you need to memorize. There are plenty of tools that will allow you to compare foreground and background of 2 colors and let you know what size text you can use them at. The longer you do accessibility, the better you get at eyeballing this. But I've been doing accessibility 10 years and I still use these types of tools. There are many tools out there. These are just a few of the ones I use the most frequently or which may benefit you as you work to customize Esri apps. WebAIM is a website where you paste in 2 hex colors. I like it because they include the contrast ratio for non-text graphics as well. For the WCAG Luminosity Contrast Ratio Analyzer Chrome plugin, that's a mouthful, I find it a quick way to check contrast because it allows you to pull 2 colors from a web page using an eyedropper tool. If you need help creating an entire color palette, ColorSafe is a nice tool to get you started. And Color Oracle is good if you're doing cartography and want to simulate the various types of color blindness, plus it works on desktop software. Once you have the set of colors you want to use, you can apply these to the theme builders in our individual apps, or you can set an organization theme in ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Online has both themes for the home app and a shared organization theme. And if you set a shared organization theme, it will actually cascade down to some of the other web apps like Hub and Instant Apps. And ArcGIS Online includes a color contrast checker that will actually warn you if you pick non-compliant colors. So let me pop over to the browser and I'm going to show you where you can set a theme in Online and Hub. It's going to get a little, I have to do a bunch of screen sharing in the next couple seconds, so just bear with me. All right, switching over here. In ArcGIS Online, there are two places to set theme. So if you want to set the organization theme, which can be used by other Esri apps, you would go to Organization, Settings, and then in the General tab, you want to scroll down to Shared Theme. From here, you would press the Manage Shared Theme Colors button, and this will open a modal that will set that organization theme. So if I go ahead and edit my link color, and I'm going to pick pink for my white background, you can see right away that it warns me that I've picked an illegible color contrast combo. So we won't save that. You can also set colors for your ArcGIS Online homepage by going to Organization, Settings, and then the Homepage tab, selecting the Launch Editor button, and then in the side panel under the Design subheading, selecting Colors. ArcGIS Online does offer a selection of accessible sort of preset themes, but they also allow you to customize your own theme. So if you are going to select Use Custom Theme, then you would click the Add Custom Style button, and this opens up a modal that does the same thing. So again, if I change my title text to a nice illegible dark gray on my black background, you can see that I'm warned that it's not going to be legible. It's not going to pass that color contrast requirement. So what I would want to be aiming for is a green check mark. Within Hub, we will use your organization's shared theme if it's available during site creation. And if you don't have one set, we'll provide Calcite, which is our default accessible theme. However, you still have the option to override the theme variables at the site level. So in our site layout editor, if you go to theme, you can change the colors. Unfortunately, neither Hub nor Instant Apps has the color contrast warning system yet. We're working on it, but not quite there yet. So if you want to, you will want to use one of those external tools, like the ones I mentioned earlier, to double check any theme modifications. All right. Esri has also been working on a couple accessible base maps that adhere to the WCAG color contrast standards. We currently have a light version, a dark version, and a grayscale version. While I've included links on this slide, you can also find these base maps on the ArcGIS blog if you search ArcGIS blog accessible base map on a search engine. And I will be showing you today how to add one of these to your organization. You will need to know what ArcGIS Online or what group in ArcGIS Online contains your organization's custom base map gallery. You might have to ask an administrator. I had to ask my boss. So let me do one last switch here. Well, actually, I say that there's two switches left. So the base map gallery, what I discovered, so our base map gallery for my organization is this base map gallery group. Once you have that name for that group, you can go to any of the blog posts for the accessible base map. So today I'm going to be adding version 2 of the accessible gray base map. There are 2 versions, so you can read through which one might make more sense in your case. If I were to, I have this open already, but if I were to click this link, it will open up the gray base map in Map Viewer. And you just want to make sure that you're logged in. And then from here, you can click Save and Open and save it. And this will open up the modal where you give it a title and tags and determine where it's going to show up online. So let's see here. I have actually gone ahead and already added this. So now I'll open up this item in the item details view in online. And from here, what you want to do is under the share heading, you want to select edit. And in the edit modal, set your sharing level to everyone. And then under the set group sharing heading, select the edit group sharing button. and find your base map gallery group. Here we go. Select it and click OK, and then save your settings. And that should make this map available to the other ArcGIS apps that can inherit a custom base map. And I will show you how you would then set this in ArcGIS Hub. So I'm going to switch over here and let me reload, make sure that I get it. And under settings in the layout editor, in the about panel section, there's a set base map option. This opens up a modal. And I already have the accessible light base map applied, but if I go to the select menu, I can now find my accessible grayscale version 2, and I'll go ahead and apply that. Click save, and then publish my site. Now my hub data will render on the gray base map, which I will demo next. I am going to have to do one more switch to Safari because I'm going to be demoing VoiceOver next, and VoiceOver is a screen reader that works best with Safari. So here we go. I'm not going to attempt to talk over VoiceOver, so what you will observe me doing is navigating the page so that you can hear the headings, the iframe title, image alt text, and links. I will navigate down to my subheadings. You will not hear the decorative SVGs. I will then open up a data set where you'll be able to see the accessible base map, and I will navigate to the full details view and toggle on an attribute chart and navigate to its text alternative, which is a table. And I want to make sure I get my base map with my changes. So here we go.
VoiceOver on Safari, creating inclusive content, protecting our water. So, link, US, drop, headings menu. Heading level 1, create, heading level 1, creating inclusive content. End of, banner, in-page actions, navigation, link, dim, share, button, share, end of, in-page actions, main. You are heading level 1, municipal water conservation. Working together to conserve Kansas water resources. Demo, image source, is drought impacting your area? Find out using the link, US, drought monitor report opens in new tab. Heading level 2, protecting our water. Shown is some recent water use for the Kansas watershed is being used within the Kansas River Reservoirs Flood and Sediment Study. This data is collected by the Kansas Division of Water Resources from annual water use report submissions from Kansas water users. Review Kansas municipal water usage. Frame. Heading level 3, residents. Residents can link. Heading level 3, businesses. Water link. Heading level 3, cities. Over 2/3 of link. Heading level 3, farmers. The Lower Smoky Access District provides the link. Center pivot irrigation circles. Image. Image source. NAS. Heading level 4. Water usage 2016 to 2000. Visited. Link. Water use press. Visited. Link. Water usage 2006. Complementary. You are currently on the heading level 1. Klara's image. Klara Schmitt. Esri R&D Center. You visited. Link. View full details. Press. Visited. Link. View full details. You are link. Skip navigation. Press link. Skip navigation. Water usage 2016 to 2019 data thumbnail. Image. Heading level 1. Water usage 2016 to 2019 data. Klara Esri link. Download more. Heading level 2. Water use link. Look. Heading level 2. Attributes 29. Table 3 columns. 30 name. Column 1 of 3. Type. Column 2 of 3. Action. Column 3 of 3. Row 2 of 30 name. WR_ID. Type. Number. Column 2 of 3. Blank. Row 3 of 30 name. UMW code. Type. Text. Column attribute can be charted. Button. Press add count of UMW code. And one more item. Group. Show table. Button. Press. Show table. Button. Close. Button. Table 2 columns. UMW code. Click. Count. Clickable. Column 2 of 2. Row 2 of 14 UMW code. IR. Column count. 10,454. VoiceOver off.
So I knew I moved through a few things very fast, and also VoiceOver is reading at like 60% dictation. So that was probably a little bit intense. But I wanted to give you a general sense of what it sounds like when you're navigating by a screen reader and hearing those headings and the text and the images and some of the links interactions. So let's see, very last, here we go. Lastly, well, let's see here. I wanted to share some resources for doing your own automated testing or manual testing. Many app development teams at Esri use ArcGIS, which is an open source accessibility testing suite produced by the accessibility auditing firm DQ. ArcGIS is also available as a browser plugin for Chrome, Firefox, and Edge, which will allow you to run the same tests that we do. Of course, automated testing isn't everything, and the accessibility community will stress you should be doing manual testing on behalf of sighted keyboard users and those using assistive technologies, such as screen readers, Zoom text, or voice recognition. Rounding this all out, if you have any other accessibility product-related questions or want to know more about Esri's commitment to accessibility, you can visit us at www.esri.com/en-us/accessibility/overview, or email us using esriaccessibility@esri.com, or we even have an accessibility specific group on Esri Communities, which is our public help forum. And that about wraps things up. Let us know if you have any questions.
Sure. Here's a question in the chat. Will ArcGIS Pro get accessible color palettes similar to ArcGIS Online in future updates? I don't know the answer offhand for Pro's roadmap. Have you heard this in a recent panel, Klara?
I don't. I do know somebody I could ask, but okay. I actually know very little about the desktop software.
Perfect. We will find an answer. And can you drop your email in the chat, Scout Stanley, please? Or maybe we'll provide it to the organizer so that everyone has the answer.
Okay. Do you want me to drop it in the chat?
How about I'll just keep track of all the questions, okay, and then we can send them. I'll send them out after the meeting.
Okay.
When we have answers. It might take us a day or so to track down
answers. Yes, Pro was work. So they have, as part of like their recent feature releases, they did improve the export to PDF process because it was obviously trying to make PDFs accessible is a sort of time-consuming process in PDF tools like Adobe Acrobat. And they did streamline the process so that some of the requirements for PDFs come in from ArcGIS Pro, including like title and language, and at least the basics. And I think they did a pretty reasonable job. There is a blog post, you could probably find that would go into more detail about that for you.
Okay, communicating or reporting accessibility issues. I have our main web page up that I'll just put in the chat. And we have an accessibility community too, right, Klara?
Yes. So let me see if I can find that link.
And we will certainly provide the slides.
And I know you can run accessibility issues that you find like accessibility issues through support, and they then do contact the product development teams that are involved. I definitely do field a fair number of issues that come in from customers or partners. So they kind of funnel through me, and then I log them with the system or in our system and track. Hub also has an accessibility status page that we sort of maintain to show current known issues related to accessibility, but we're a little bit, most of the products tend to use the voluntary product accessibility template, and you can find those on that Esri.com page with the accessibility overview to see what are the known sort of defects. And
Was anyone as surprised as I was to hear the screen reader? That was my first time hearing it, like someone truly navigate through a website with it. Amy says yes. Maybe like her, yes, if you agree. That was mind-blowing to me.
And there's the accessibility Esri community group. We also, yes, and you can also post issues there, and they also do get picked up by product teams.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, I guess hearing none, we're happy to turn it back over to the organizers or give everyone a few more minutes for lunch before their next meeting.